Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Dan Burling. Dan Burling representing the 147th District, which includes the counties of Allegheny, Livingston, Wyoming, and Genesee. We want to thank you folks all across that part of New York State for tuning in for this show today. And Dan Burling, thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Mike.
You know, last time we kind of got caught up as to, where the budget debate was heading here at the state capitol. I think it's time for another update.
Well, I'll tell you, our camera person here said big smile. I don't know if we have much to smile about these days so much.
Well, but you still want to smile. People like it when you smile.
Yeah.
So we're smiling through our tears.
Oh, boy, it's tough, tough
honest, to be a little bit serious about it, though. In our last show, we talked a little bit about how in the November elections of 2010, the voters of New York State said, we want to shake things up a little bit. We want some change.
And they did.
The state needs to rein in its free spending ways of the past several years, decades, some might say. When you do that, there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some hurt, and I think that's starting to manifest itself.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And, of course, this is Tuesday, and it's lobby day here in New York, and as I watched the Today show in my apartment this morning, I see that they said 2,000 people were going to be here in Albany. It looks like a lot more than 2,000 people, actually. And, of course, already this morning I've seen my school superintendents, I've seen my libraries, I've seen some folks that have early childhood intervention programs. And you're right, it's, the cuts are broad and the cuts are deep. The problem that I have, and a lot of us have up in Western New York in our area, is the inequity of the cuts. And what I mean is that we all know that everyone needs to take cuts, and education is obviously on the table. And the two biggest pots of money, quite frankly, are education and health care. And I'm in the health care field. I'm seeing cuts to my own business, through Medicaid, something I'm willing to share like everybody else is, but I want it to be shared equally. And the problem that I see as a legislator from Western New York and from upstate New York is an inequity in the cuts. Our schools, which are much poorer districts than they are on Long Island, Manhattan, Yonkers, places like this, Westchester, where there's high unemployment and big paying jobs, our schools are very heavily dependent upon state aid. So just to give you an example, let's say that 50% of our budget is state aid, whereas down in Westchester it may be 5%. You take a 10% cut from us, and it's 5% of our state aid. A 10% cut of 5% is only 0.5%. So it's inequitable. We are losing a lot more state aid in our schools in Western New York than they are in the more wealthier areas where they can afford to take cuts. Some of these schools probably don't even need state aid. They're wealthy enough. The tax basis is strong enough. So that's something that I'm seeing, and it's nothing new here in Albany. There seems to be a preponderance of punishing us up in Western New York versus those areas down in Long Island and Westchester and New York City and everything where they're Democrat strongholds and where you have a Democratic governor, a Democrat-controlled state assembly. So what I'm saying is we're all willing to make those cuts. We're all willing to do our fair share. But let's do it fairly. And I don't think that my schools are being treated fairly.
As part of the Western New York delegation, do you get that sense sometimes that like you're the stepchild to the rest of the family of the state of New York?
And you've seen it not only in this issue but other issues. This is nothing new for us, and we're up to a fight. And we will join forces, Republicans and Democrats, up in Western New York to try to demonstrate to the powers that be, the governor and the leaders in the legislature, that we need to do this a little bit more fairly. Our kids shouldn't be treated as second-rate citizens compared to those in the other school districts.
All right. To go back to the original premise, though, the cuts are necessary. It's what the people are calling for.
Exactly. I understand all that.
The state is overspending its means. A lot of school districts right now, again, especially, as you noted, in upstate New York, are facing what look to be some pretty major layoffs on the part of its educators, the teachers, and the classrooms and all that, and trying to figure out how they're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. Like I say, I did meet with all my school superintendents, most of my school superintendents this morning, and they're a great group, and they understand what needs to be done, and they're willing to do their fair share. But they did point out, as I'm pointing out in this program, the inequity of the cuts that are in this particular budget. And if you look at, for instance, the county that I live in, that I wholly represent, which is Wyoming County, we are disproportionately being cut more than any other county in New York State. So it's just, again, it's the downstate interest, the New York City interest and everything, looking at Western New York and the poorer counties like stepchildren, and we need to fight and rally against that, and that's what I'll be doing.
And that's still all on the table.
It's still on the table, right? But that's why we need to have this discussion.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I need the people out there. I need my constituents out there to raise the fear of these cuts. That's one of the reasons we're doing this program right now, and I hope people are watching it. Reach out, write letters and everything. Understand that, yes, we are willing to do what needs to be done. Matter of fact, we're probably more willing than most people are. We're a tough bunch. But don't cut us disproportionately. Don't take away from our kids so you can give to the people down in New York City.
It's interesting because the way that works out, the reason it's working out that way is because of these education formulas that have been in place for years here at the state capitol.
Right.
That all go to how the funds are distributed in the first place, and there's so many criteria, and whether it's the.
Well, that's a very good point, Mike. And these formulas.
I thought this new governor was going to reconfigure.
I thought
those
he was
formulas.
too. What did he do? He just came out with the same old formula, and he just whacked a bunch of aid, to our rural school districts, but using the same old formula, which is really based upon the special programs and needs of the New York City and metropolitan area schools, big cities, the Big Five, if you will. Of course, a lot of the Big Five don't get the same aid as we do. They're separate. That's a whole different thing that
part of the weirdness of the formulas and things.
The whole thing. However, it's not that formula which shows on that formula aid for this, aid for that. A lot of that we don't even take. We don't even use. So if it looks like we're getting the state aid, we're not even getting it because we don't use those programs.
Right.
The ladder program and many others, which would be Greek to folks out there, was something I've been dealing with for 13 years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just that diversity that is the state of New York. From the very rural areas, like what you represent, Wyoming County and other counties, versus Manhattan, and everything in between.
People laugh about it, but as you know, we mentioned this before. But I have a bill. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that would separate New York State into two states, and some people laugh about that. But the more we see of the disparities between New York City and our upstate, the more the disconnect we see, the more credibility it gives to doing something like that. People say, well, we can't, we couldn't survive without the help from New York City. Well, geez, back in 2008 when the stock market crashed, it sure as heck didn't help us any. Our economy was pretty stable because we never saw the boom, And I tell you what, if they need food, where are they going to get the food from? They're going to have to buy it from us. There's something to be said about the separation. They're so ideologically, philosophically, economically different and separate from us. It's like night and day. We're closer to Ohio than we are New York City.
I was just going to make that point that there's roughly 18 million people in New York State, half of which
19 million now.
19.
Yeah.
Well, the half of which live in New York City. I mean, it's pretty
60%.
It's kind of, roughly
60%, right?
For sake of argument.
Yeah.
And you've got the economic thing, and some people say, oh, upstate could never survive without the economic engine that is Wall Street and all that happens in New York City. But they are such diverse entities, and you put your finger right on it. It's not just the economics of it. People just tend to think differently about so many different things, whether they're moral and ethical issues or whatever it may be. it's like two different lands.
Well, it is, and I mean, it's a real culture shock, for a country boy like me to come down here, and have to, 13, 14 years ago to interact with all these New York City guys. I mean, I did a little bit when I was in the Marine Corps in the service, I to tell a little funny story. My bunkmate, it was in 1965, folks. I'm in the Marine Corps down in Paris Island. You know who my bunkmate was? A Bonanno of the crime family down in New York City. Oh, I tell you what, the drill instructor said, "Where's your switchblade, Burling?" Just for a little laugh, but I don't know if he ever made it through or not.
A little bit of culture shock for you, for the young fella. That's funny. We tell the stories here that many New York City legislators have never seen a cow before.
Well, I like to tell the story about and it's a true story, the family or the group that came down from the city, from the inner city, to go visit the farms, and to see where milk was produced and all that, and the cows and all that. Then they went, some of these kids never seen cows before, and they went to Wegmans, and the supermarket and all that. Then they had a little group meeting afterwards, and one little kid raised his hand. What'd you like about it? He says, "Well, what about the milk?" He says, "Well, I like the milk that comes from Wegmans better than the one that comes from the farms." No idea.
It's all coming from the same, from Bessie. Son.
That's right. Yeah.
It is interesting because those discussions play out on the floor of the Assembly as part of the debate.
Well,
you hear the different interests being represented, whether it's on education issues or healthcare issues. People bring their own expertise.
The farm labor bills, for crying out loud. I mean, these people have no idea. They want. We have laborers who work our farms, who are very happy to have that income coming in, and they want to give them a designated day off, and all these rights. I think they're helping these farm workers. These farm workers just want to work. I'll tell you what. When the peas are ripe, they have to be harvested. Whether it's 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 10 o'clock at night, the cows have to milk 3 times a day. When the corn reaches peak, it has to be harvested. When the hay is dry and you got some dry weather, you got to cut the hay and put the hay away. Farms and farming does not wait upon any person. It's completely dependent upon the weather and nature. And when it's time to harvest, it's time to harvest. You can't have somebody taking it. "Oh, I think I'll take a day off today." No, you got to be in the field working.
And for all those proposals to institute a day off here, or this kind of pay, you hear a lot from the labor themselves that they don't want things to change there because it ends up hurting them.
I'll tell you what this is all about. This is kind of just plain hardball politics as far as I'm concerned. This is about organized labor. This is about unions gaining power and strength and organizing the farm workers. And can you imagine how devastating it would be to our farms if there was a negotiation over whether or not there should be porta potties at a certain place out in the field, and all of a sudden the workers are refused to harvest the cabbage or harvest the beets or harvest the onions or milk the cows? This is crazy nonsense, but this is what I deal with. And that's why, folks, you got to send folks like me and others that know about the real nature of New York down here to fight your battles, because these people don't know anything about it.
I wish we had more time, because then maybe we could get into some of the other union issues that are, some will say, hurting New York State.
That'd be a good topic of discussion.
Really an important part of these budget talks that are happening right now here at the state capitol. A lot of it having to do with teachers' unions right now, and how that's going to play out, because if the school districts have to do their layoffs.
Last in, first out issue, big issue.
And as we're
going
to see the Senate,
teachers we want to keep.
I think we see the Senate pass a bill this week on that.
That's right.
Well, we're out of time. I have to say we've got to go. Before I do, though, I said I'd let you folks know how you could reach out to your representative. You can get a hold of Dan Burling at his office.